Okay, so here is my controller, my custom designed, custom built controller. Because there were a lot of different games that came out and a lot of different ways that those games were controlled back in the day. Very early on, within just a couple of years, you had trackballs, you had spinners, you had you had twin stick, different types of twin stick. You had all kinds of things, and then you had Cubert, which was diagonal. Vanguard that did the up and down, and that actually this is those are all part of all of this. And then I had to make some compensations as well with what I wanted, which would have been either two decks or a lot wider or something. And I only had obviously this is just a little over 2 feet. First thing I wanted to do was make sure that I could accommodate the games that I knew I wanted to play. I looked at a lot of different controllers that were available, and I'm not going to get into brands or anything like that. There was one that had twin sticks and it had a ball on it, but it didn't have a spinner. And then there were other things that I wanted to do as well. So it was hard to find. It was hard to find something that had everything that I wanted without it being a 4-player huge grand thing. I wanted a controller that covered as many games as possible, as many scenarios as possible, layout scenarios, as opposed to accommodating as many people as possible. Any of the beat 'em ups or any of the fighting games, any of that kind of stuff. No fun. Nobody. You would not want to grab this controller to go with your friends and go play Gauntlet for the night without realizing that the controller is a keyboard. Just sort of thinking, well, I get buttons and then I guess you just plug it in, because I came from the days that you had one of those waffle plugs and you plugged it into a port and everything just worked. So I wasn't thinking about the fact that this is a keyboard, and if I had known that ahead of time, and if I had known the other things that I was going to need or want on this, I would have done it very differently. As it turned out, I'm very happy with this. I'm not going to recommend the person who I purchased this from, who built this for me, because there were some things that happened that I did not agree with. Single parent or at home with the kids during COVID and all of that stuff. So short of the long is, I got a very well built controller from him that was not wired even remotely properly, is the word that my recently passed self is trying to think of here. And I did not elaborate at all on that, so I'll take a moment here to do that. The board was wired. The board was just wired wrong. I had to go in and, without knowing anything about this, sort of figure it out. And I'm not patting myself on the back. It wasn't that difficult to figure out because I figured it out. And going from opening up the controller for the first time and being like, oh my God, and then sitting down and actually figuring it out, and then mapping out what letters that I needed to do, because MAME has certain defaults that you want to be able to do so that most of your games will just automatically play. But you've got to wire your board correctly. The stick has to be up and down, left and right. The buttons need to be H, Y, and I forget what it is. So basically, this is just a much clunkier and less comprehensive version of this. It's just a keyboard. It's just assigned 2 keys. So when I do something like this and hit this button 1, you can see it's an H. Just like if I hit the H, it's an H. And button 2 is a Y, just like if I hit Y. So now I can, I'm going to backspace because I don't remember if we even have a backspace on some of these. So I don't have everything covered, but even the joystick is, each direction is actually assigned to a letter as well, or a key. It doesn't have to be a letter. And then my flight stick, and even the flight stick buttons, these buttons here, the main joystick, would be just the normal up and down keys. So, I mean, if you wanted to, you could actually you probably can't see that, but that's moving the cursor back and forth. The trackball is basically just another mouse. It's just an inverted mouse. You can see just the cursor just above the window there, and the spinner will actually move it on one plane. So basically, the spinner and the trackball are read the way that a mouse would be read, and then everything else are basically read as keystrokes. Before I realized that I could add a second keyboard, I just didn't ever know that, didn't ever think to, why would you plug two keyboards into a, you wouldn't even think to do it. So these buttons that I initially had intended to be for like asteroids or something like that, not really thinking about the overall logistics of reaching over. So it actually worked out fine. I tried to do the asteroids with the joystick and the buttons, and it's just not the same thing if you're used to it. The only thing that I wish I could do that makes use of the buttons but could use the joystick is Defender. I wish you could reverse and thrust with the joystick as well. It would make that game a completely different experience. So this became, back button and then select. So like this is actually tab, this is actually enter. I got really lucky. It just turned out that I had 6 sort of primary buttons before I realized I could do this. And now it's just as easy because while you're down here, you're doing this instead of down here and trying to fish up here because it's usually much darker here. When you don't realize that it's just a keyboard, when you don't realize how all of this is supposed to work to begin with on a very simple level, and once you realize that, it is simple. But when you don't know that you need this button to be an H, you just need to take that button and put it into where the H is. And it's really that simple once you figure it out. But if you don't know anything about any of this, you don't even know where to begin. So you open it up and all you see is just spaghetti. It's insane. Anybody that's interested in that, it's not going to surprise you what it looks like. But if you don't know what you're doing, it's like walking into the middle of an open heart surgery and holy shit, you just don't know what to do, so you have to figure it out. The short of the long is, I thought I was laying out buttons for different games. I was going to end up saying, oh, I'm going to need this key and that key and this key and that key. And then after I did all of that mapping out that I wound up having to do, opening this thing up and all of that, which I'm not going to do, for a very different reason. I actually attached a second keyboard once I realized I could do that. So if I need to get into nitty gritty stuff here, the alt tab and all that crap, then I can do that. But for the actual direct interactive, I've got the system buttons that I need right here. That's fine because even though I set up I wanted 6 buttons in a row for those games that need all the buttons, I didn't think about standing and, about having, there was just no room for that anyway. Everything else is pretty good. Even the knuckle room on this, because the mounting of this sort of was in separate stages as well. My biggest thing was to have a layout that worked for as many games as possible, and I knew that some games you would need a flight stick with a button, maybe 2 buttons, but where was that flight stick going to be? And you had spinner games, but sometimes your spinner was it was a spinner with buttons, but sometimes it was a spinner with a stick, like Tron is a spinner with a flight stick. I'm not really happy with this flight stick. What I wish I had was a 3rd button, because then when I'm playing Discs of Tron, I can move around with the flight stick and I can move the target with the spinner, and instead of going up and down, I could go up and down with my thumb, but now I could only go up or down, and I've never tried to see if I could cycle through, because if I could do that, then that would work. Of course, the bigger reason that I'm failing to mention why I don't like my flight stick is that I think it's mounted crooked. When it's resting just naturally, you can twist it so that it's straight up and down, but when it's resting naturally, it's a little bit crooked. I never really checked it before I stopped opening this thing up every 2 days, and it's just like Tron that I really noticed it being an issue. It's not an issue in any of the other games. When you go to the side, it tends to toggle between the side and the diagonal, and so that's the biggest problem that I have. I'm sure you recognize the brand. I don't know what the brand is. I'm not dishing this flight stick. I'm talking about for my personal use. But I was expecting an actual flight stick like you have with Tron, like flight sticks used to be back in the day,
with the suction cup, mount, those flight sticks that actually were a little bit on the bigger side and all that. Not necessarily glowy like the Tron sticks were, but that sort of bigger, beefier with the trigger and 2 buttons on the side or something like that. I'm sure. Yeah, and I know that they make them. I've seen them in other places. That's what I was thinking I was going to get with a flight stick. The biggest thing is it just doesn't respond very well because I think it just might be something wrong in the mounting or just misaligned or something.
So the other complaint that I have, the spinner that I got, it feels like a decent spinner, but it didn't have any counterweight to it at all. I wound up drilling my own counterweight with a hand drill. I just sat there just a little bit at a time over like 2 weeks instead of just going and just having it bore. It's a nice enough built spinner. I'm sure people could look at it and tell me what brand it is. And that is one thing that I will say about him. He did not do shoddy work. He did the layout exactly how I did it. And I spent a lot of time working on this layout because this layout covers a lot of games, including games that I have yet to find. One game that I have yet to find. So, I wanted a spinner, but I wanted a spinner with buttons on both sides of it. I wanted a flight stick, but I also wanted twin sticks, but I didn't want a flight stick to be one of the twin sticks. Flight stick is very, very little use for me, but I love Battlezone, and you just, unless you have a pedal, and I can't even imagine doing it with a pedal, you need the thumb. There's my layout, The padding I actually added myself, which is the joke because now my access screws are covered up, so I'm going to take the padding off and then figure out how to make a thing so that you can access it again. Otherwise, I would actually probably pull it out and show you. It's nothing spectacular. The curtain that you pull aside, like the first time that you saw them pull up the control board on an arcade machine back in the day, and it was like, and you expected to get this monster, and it's just like this little clump of wires, and then like a TV set in a little, it looked like an 8-track, it's like, what? That's it? So yes, most of this is just hollow, and actually it's just the real estate for all of the hardware that attaches to everything. So everything on this is plain. It's all one color. He didn't ask me about the color that I would want for this, and I didn't really care. I have a feeling that this actually lights up. It's just maybe not connected. It just has that look. It's got that translucent, like your mom's roll-on, deodorant had. All the Neo Geos, they have the 7, and so just in case, I actually did this for games that I don't even play. But I also knew that you would need something like that for Defender. Okay, so I wanted a spinner and then I wanted an XY configured button set. Vanguard was what I had in mind, but I also just wanted it just in case. So I wanted buttons on both sides of the spinner, and I wanted buttons closer to the flight stick if possible. So I picked this to put my little XY cluster. This stick actually can lock to up and down, because that was another thing that I wanted the up and down lock. And when I first got this was locked just up and down, so you can't go diagonally with it.
And just a little senior moment in waiting practice here. It's not locked side to side. Some of the joysticks will come with a mechanism. It basically only allows them to go up and down. If you're playing Pac-Man or Ms. Pac-Man, you can sort of hit both of the connectors to make the diagonal, and it can screw you up. That mechanism makes that a lot easier. If you put that mechanism on your joystick and you mount the joystick diagonally and you program it right, that's how you can do a Q*bert. How I do Q*bert is you actually for each direction you give it both commands that it has to get before it moves, and so then you have to go to the diagonal to get it. The problem is that mechanism was activated in that middle joystick. That basically made playing Robotron nearly impossible. It made it impossible because and I was trying. I was like, why isn't this working? And then I realized, and then I again opened up the case again and went in and figured that out. Just like I had to open up the case to go in and figure out that I needed to attach a counterweight to the spinner. And so there was a lot of opening up the case to figure things out and to modify stuff. Not modify stuff because I didn't like it. It's just I don't think it was done correctly. Ideally, what you would have is you would have a set of sticks for twin sticks, and then you would have a separate stick that was just by itself, that was just up and down and left and right locked. Clean twin stick station, but there's just no room. You know, at some point, like I said, it took me a long time to just figure this out. And even then, I got that top row of buttons that I was thinking was going to be for asteroids and Star Castle and stuff. I got that wrong because that would not have worked out. So then I wanted the trackball, and I wanted the trackball, obviously with the buttons. It's not much more spread out than it would have been on a regular machine back in the day. It doesn't really matter where they are. And I think that part of that was when the handheld sticks were off kilter from each other. Or is it like this? I don't know what it was. There was somehow they wound up off kilter, and you got used to that. So this doesn't bother me. It bothers me more to play asteroids. When I had a thumbstick, when it was a handheld, it didn't bother me as much because you don't have any choice, really. And I never played one on a keyboard. So I wanted these juxtapositions. So the battle zone, and then you had Robotron and your other twin sticks, and then there was Tron and discs of Tron, and then we had Vanguard. Here was Vanguard. Any kind of, back and forth and all that. And if you really got creative, you could probably do Gauntlet or something like that. You could do a 2-player game. You wouldn't want to do a beat 'em up, I don't think, but something, well, you probably wouldn't want to do Gauntlet either. To me, 2-player games were always you're sharing a set of controls. I figured if I did the Neo Geo, the fighting, the whatever, then that would be enough for Defender. And if it was enough for Defender, it would be enough for anything. For a lot of sticks, you would see this, and then you would see that on over here, and then the ball in the middle. There was a very popular brand that I was looking at that had that. But again, they didn't have the spinner. Now that I understand it better, you could have a couple of different controls. You don't have to have everything all at once. If they're plugged in, at different times. But even if they aren't, they still function the same way. I mean, I can control the mouse with this touchpad here. I can control the mouse with this, and I can control the X-plane of the mouse with the biplane. I never get that right. The X-plane of the mouse. There's no design, and that's intentional. The fact that this is all just black and green is all intentional. So that was not a half-assed job by him. He said, well, what do you want? Design, and I could have picked up all that and had it glowing and all of that stuff. I just wanted functional. When it comes to this kind of stuff, I know I tricked out the other stuff with the lights and everything, but when it came to this stuff, I just wanted it to just be functional because that's what I was used to. So this was just this open cavity, so I just set this thing in, and I would just kind of pull it out, and it was just kind of cute because I could pull it out, and then I would put it back. It was almost like putting my toys away. And then I started to get into the games a little bit more, and it got past the whole like, hey, this is cool. Look at this. I'm playing it. I'm playing Pac-Man, and I'm doing it in my office. It's great. Because this never started to be a Boomer Dad thing. Boomer Dad came about after all of this, because this was strictly hobby. I thought I was so clever because I didn't know how I was gonna mount it, and I just put these two pieces right here, and as long as you didn't pull it all the way out, it's like a drawer, it holds it in. So I could just basically slide it back and forth, but the problem is it slides back and forth while you play as well. These arcades, these little arcades that hang on a wall, I don't even know how anybody could play an arcade that's hanging on a wall. I would be at the end of a round of Robotron, and my hands would be over in here. So then I drilled 2 holes, and I got a couple of these spring things, and then even that was rattling. And so I wedged them in to the point where this is solid. This is solid, but I could have this out of here and in my lap in less than 15 seconds. If I ever needed to get into it, other than having to remove the padding that I put on without thinking about access. That's basically the controller. It was not cheap. I don't know any of the brand names. I don't know what the weight of anything is. I just know that I have played the shit out of this. I don't play on it 6 hours a day, but I do play it every day. It was put together very well. When you know what's all involved in these cabinets, this, and then
the brains or the guts, which you can't see, but could literally be the size of an interface or a hard drive. My initial computer that I had for this was just one of those little HP things that you could get for like $150. Little graphics and 8-bit stuff, and because that's all I wanted to play was the MAME stuff, so I didn't need much of a computer. Now I've got my old video editing computer, so it handles everything just fine. I'm doing a lot more of my production on the fly now with the Boomer Dad channel. And if you like that, if you prefer that, if you appreciate that, then let me know in the comments, because I would like to know what you think, and I will reply to any comments that you leave. Anyway, a lot of that has been inspired by people like you who are still watching, because if you are still watching, it's people like you who this is in particular meant for. Let me, other than brand names and all that other stuff, let me know if there's anything that I missed that you're curious about, or anything else that you'd like to see on the channel. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope you have a fantastic day.